Hello, everyone. It's great to see everybody. Welcome to the next installment of the NASEO Powering Up Data Center discussion series, the webinar series. During these webinar series, we explore specific strategies that state energy offices can use to address growing data center electricity demand while also supporting energy affordability and reliability. And we hope to deliver a few things with this data center series. We hope to provide you with real-time information on a subject that is ever-changing and quickly changing, that you can understand sort of the data on market demand for some of the considerations for data centers, the latest trends, technology advancements, and resources. We're hoping to enhance state energy offices' understanding of the challenges and opportunities that are associated with data centers, both in the near term as well as the mid and long term. We're hoping to equip you all with ability to develop policies and programs to meet the energy needs in your state and propel economic development, and to explore specific strategies to address growing data center electricity demand. We've had a number of webinars already in this series, and Camille will put in the chat a link to some of the recordings and slides to some of the earlier webinars, which ranged from kind of setting the scene of what are we talking about when we're talking about data centers, to kind of tools that some states have developed, to thinking about energy security when it comes to data centers, large load flexibility. We had a session on ORNL's Mega DC, which is a technical assistance program for states, as well as another follow-up on some of the large load flexibility considerations, which was one of the hot topics that we've discussed during our webinar series. So we're really excited to continue this today with our excellent panel of speakers. And today we're looking at kind of the role of conventional and emerging resources in meeting data center demand and exploring the various fossil energy sources that states and industry are considering to support energy demand from data centers and to support this load growth. And so we'll have a couple of expert speakers discussing opportunities for coal, natural gas, propane, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and how to pair that with data centers. And I'm very excited to also welcome our moderator, John Jenks, who's the Director of Energy Market Development from the Wyoming Energy Authority. He'll take us through the webinar. We will have remarks from Carbon Direct, Dr. Julia Friedman, Chief Scientist at Carbon Direct, that will kick us off. And then we're also joined by Austin Wicker, who is the Senior Manager for State Government Affairs at the National Propane Gas Association. And then we will go into moderated discussion and have some time for audience Q&A at the end today. So if you have any questions for our expert panel, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A throughout the presentations, and then we can get to them when we get to the end. So with that, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to John Jenks from the Wyoming Energy Authority.
Thanks, Kirsten. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. As Kirsten said, my name is John Jenks. I am the Director of Energy Market Development at the Wyoming Energy Authority. I have a very broad title for a very broad assortment of things that I cover. I mainly cover everything related to electricity here, so ranging from transmission issues to economic development issues with our utilities to Public Service Commission issues, FERC, and everything in between. I also have our renewable portfolio under my purview as well. So, as I said, very broad. For those that aren't familiar, the Wyoming Energy Authority is the state of Wyoming's energy office. We were formed actually going on about 6 years now, after the merging of the Infrastructure Authority, the Pipeline Authority, and our state energy office, which was in our Economic Development Agency. So we put all of the energy stuff into one entity, kind of as a one-stop shop, or a Department of Energy for the state. We are not a regulatory agency. We don't do anything regulatory. We are purely advocacy, policy, and financing and investment in energy resources. We are unique, as I said. We did inherit all of the Transmission Authority and Pipeline Authority powers, so we are also a Transmission and Pipeline Authority, which makes us unique. Really, I am very passionate about this topic for a variety of reasons. So I'm really excited to get the opportunity to moderate a great panel today. I think we all know the importance of the data center and AI race and build out that is needed in this country. And it's a race not only with our foreign adversaries, but also just a global economic race for build out of data centers and AI to unlock economic development and and help our communities grow. And prosper. It's also a national and economic security issue, as we all know. I think the other side of that coin too, though, that is really important, and I really kind of want to hone in on today, is the importance of affordable and reliable electricity. I say this all the time when I go around and talk to people, but we have been very blessed and fortunate in this country to have affordable and reliable electricity. That's not very common in the world. It's either very expensive and reliable or cheap and unreliable. We have been blessed and fortunate to have affordable and reliable and abundant electricity and energy as a country. And I would argue that has helped contribute to us becoming a global economic and military superpower in the 20th and 21st century. And I don't think we should lose sight of that, especially as state energy offices and everything that we do. To get a little bit more drilled in on the topic at hand, I just wanted to give a broad, very brief overview of the data center landscape in Wyoming, and then talk briefly about some initial thoughts on how fossil fuels can meet the demand for data centers that we're seeing today and that is coming tomorrow. The data center landscape in Wyoming really started about 10 to 15 years ago. Southeast Wyoming has become and is becoming more and more of a data center hub. About 10 to 15 years ago, Microsoft announced their build out of their first data center in Wyoming, in the Cheyenne area here. On the heels of that, or right around that time too, a national supercomputing lab announced that they were coming to Cheyenne and are now operating here as well. As time went on, we saw some crypto operations kind of popping up around the Southeast Wyoming area as well. And since then, we've seen Microsoft build out a tremendous amount of more data centers in the area. Meta has announced and is actually under construction just outside of Cheyenne, and we also just had the exciting announcement of the Tallgrass Caruso project outside of Cheyenne that will utilize carbon capture and utilization with their project as well. So again, there is just a tremendous amount of excitement in the Cheyenne area and Wyoming in general for data centers. A large part of this build out and boom and data center development in Southeast Wyoming can be really attributed to Black Hills Energy. And I think it's really important to give them a shout out. They were very aggressive and proactive in their economic development strategy to attract data center development and large load development in the Cheyenne area. About 8 to 10 years ago, around this time, they developed a new tariff that was approved by our Public Service Commission to make data center build out not only more attractive for companies, but to also protect the ratepayers. Wyoming also around that time passed legislation that mandated ring fencing and protecting existing ratepayers from large loads coming onto the system. Now, it's kind of funny how the legislature at that time defined large loads as 5 megawatts. We know how quickly that has changed, but the premise of it still has stayed the same, and the foundation of that has stayed the same. Mandating our Public Service Commission to protect existing ratepayers from these large loads, especially data centers that are coming onto the system. And I am very proud to say that Wyoming was very forward thinking and progressive, honestly, and thinking about these issues of protecting ratepayers. I know a lot of other states that you guys are from have been are grappling with this issue of protecting ratepayers. And while it's still an issue here that we are very cognizant of, between the tariff that was approved by Black Hills and then subsequently some other utilities, and then of course the legislation that mandated this, it's really kind of been a non-issue here, which is we're very fortunate to have. So why Wyoming? Why are data centers really looking at Wyoming, in particular Southeast Wyoming? I think a lot of credit is given to Black Hills on that, but also, as you know, Wyoming is generally cool. cold and dry. It's a perfect climate for data centers. We also have a lot of wide open spaces, which a lot of land available. And then, of course, as many of you know, our tax climate is very favorable for business and economic development. We have very low taxes. And we also have a sales and use tax exemption on data center equipment and materials, which, as far as we can tell, it has been very successful in attracting data centers compared to states that maybe don't have that. And then on the other side of this coin, why does Wyoming like data centers? I think is a fair question, and why should similar states like data centers? Well, one is the property taxes. I think it's pretty well known across the state now that Microsoft is one of the top non-mineral property taxpayers of the state. So our local communities, especially here in the Cheyenne area, are benefiting tremendously from that added revenue from these data centers. They of course bring jobs too. They bring the construction jobs, but I think actually more excitingly on the Wyoming side, a lot of our communities, even Cheyenne, struggle to absorb a lot of workers moving to a community. Our communities are small. Cheyenne's our biggest city, and it's 60,000 people. So a large manufacturing facility or a large distribution warehousing facility can overwhelm communities, even in Cheyenne. So data centers don't necessarily bring a lot of jobs, but they bring high-paying jobs, which is kind of best of both worlds for Wyoming. It's really a great marriage there of what we want. And then from the Energy Authority's perspective, more is more. We say that all the time. The more demand for energy and electricity is good for Wyoming's energy and electricity industry. We really feel that the more demand that we can put on the grid, the more demand for electrons is good for Wyoming's legacy industry, so our fossil fuel industry, which we're going to talk about today. But we also feel like it's a great opportunity for emerging industries like nuclear that we're all in on, and then of course for the alternative energies like wind and solar. So, if there's a demand for electrons and energy, we want that to come from Wyoming, and of course data centers take a lot of energy and electricity, so why not put them here? And then lastly, before I turn it over to our panelists, to kind of hone in a little bit more on the topic at hand today, how can fossil fuel meet the demand of data centers today? Well, we know that data centers require and will be requiring even more affordable, reliable, baseload, and dispatchable energy. They got to have it. They got to have it almost all the time, for the most part. And we feel at the Energy Authority that our legacy industries, our fossil fuel industry, can provide that for now, until maybe something else comes along like nuclear or something. But I think for the time being, we feel like that the fossil fuel industry is the perfect opportunity to provide that. And one of those ways is to utilize underutilized capacity at coal-fired power plants. Of course, Wyoming has a lot of coal. We have a lot of coal-fired power plants. And I was doing some homework on this just last month. America's Power, which is a electricity energy advocacy organization, filed some comments at the FERC regarding the advance notice of proposed rulemaking that came from the Department of Energy, and they had some interesting statistics that I'm just going to quickly cite. They said that the average capacity factor for the nation's coal fleet was 43% last year, which means that there is considerable underutilized generating capacity available to serve large loads. To illustrate the potential magnitude of this underutilized capacity, increasing the average capacity factor for the coal fleet to just 63%, the average fleet-wide capacity factor would translate into slightly more than 35,000 megawatts of additional power, or enough to operate 35 or so-ish of the largest hyperscale data centers. So we look at this as a tremendous opportunity for our coal industry and our coal communities to benefit from all of this power demand, at least as a bridge to whatever might be coming in the future, like nuclear, right? So we understand that the coal industry is not going to come back to what it was in the 1980s or 1990s necessarily, but it can be a nice bridge, a nice kind of next step, a step to the next to what's coming on in the energy horizon. And then we also look at it as a tremendous opportunity for our gas fleet or for our gas industry. Wyoming, of course, also has a lot of oil and gas resources. And we look at it as a great opportunity to grow the gas fleet in Wyoming and across the region and across the country, and then also correspondingly our gas infrastructure. With the gas side, I think we've all seen it that there's just a tremendously growing interest in behind the meter solutions with natural gas. And I think all of this can be coupled with carbon capture and utilization. And Wyoming has been leading the country in this. We've had a lot of different projects that have been very innovative in this space. And an interesting partner in this is actually the oil and gas industry themselves. They look at it, they look at the carbon utilization side of things as a great opportunity for enhanced oil recovery and to expand their operations. So for us, the data center industry, coupled with leveraging our traditional fossil fuel fleet with carbon capture and carbon utilization, is a great opportunity for economic development in the state of Wyoming. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the panelists and let them talk about their respective areas. So first up, we'll have Dr. Julio Friedman, who is Chief Scientist at Carbon Direct. So Dr. Friedman, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, John, and give my fond regards to the good people of Wyoming. I'm a huge fan and longtime visitor. I've been working on and off in the state for over almost 40 years now, so enthusiastic about what you're doing. Let me start sharing the presentation here. We have a lot of ground to cover and a short amount of time to do it, so hopefully we will get to plenty of time for questions. I do want to let everybody know that I have shared this presentation with NASEO so that they can share it with you. So you can pay attention here and then get the slides at another time. So Carbon Direct is a company that helps all of the hyperscalers figure out how to get firm, clean power. It's among the many services we offer, but we are working with all of them today. So what we're saying comes from a position of experience and knowledge. You've probably seen something that looks like this. This is the 10-year forecast for U.S. data center demand from the International Energy Agency. In the next 10 years, or certainly in the next 5 years, a lot of that demand is going to be met with natural gas. Yes, there will be growth in solar PV. Yes, there will be growth in wind and other renewables. But the workhorse here is natural gas, and will likely continue to do that even after 2030. There's a bunch of reasons why. I'll get into it. I will say that the range of forecasts is wide. The dark blue line in the middle of that swarm is the IEA number, but increasingly people are revising these numbers up. And we are seeing the potential to go well beyond just 200 terawatt hours of growth. We're looking at something like 81 gigawatts of new gas by 2030. That's 19 billion cubic feet of natural gas addition here by 2035. That is going to actually stress the grid in a whole bunch of ways, including the gas grid as well as the power grid. But we're starting to see more and more consumption of gas. These are just a couple of recent stories that come from it, up to 106 gigawatts by 2035. GE Vernova says they're out of turbines. The rest of the world is standing ready. Siemens is shipping them. Mitsubishi's shipping them. The small turbine manufacturers are shipping them. So that is coming on fast. Against this backdrop, carbon capture and storage looks increasingly interesting, in no small part because the hyperscalers want it. They care about their emissions profiles very much. The top 5 things they care about: speed, 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 cost, and carbon. But carbon's in the top 5. They're going to natural gas in no small part because of the speed. And if you look at the build-out that's coming here, a lot of gas under construction, a lot of gas in pre-construction. When you add all of that with the capacity, gas is huge. They are able to build that quickly, permit it quickly, get it up in 18 months. The CCS is something they're looking at to manage the emissions going forward from that. And in fact, there's good reasons why. These things have a lot of benefits to them. One of them, as John was saying, clean, firm power that is dispatchable. The characteristics of a natural gas plant are the characteristics of a natural gas plant with CCS. In addition to the fact that you get the power when you want it, when you need it, which the hyperscalers and the data center operators need, you also can add renewables with this. Variable renewables actually balance well with natural gas. So this will help you get more renewables onto the grid while you're doing these other things. It allows you to get to scale pretty much right away. You can get to hundreds of gigawatts fast, and you'll see soon a lot of these projects are in the gigawatt plus territory. It has broad geographic availability. It is not an option for the entire United States. Not all 50 states can do CCS, but a supermajority can. And we have specific tools that are geographically indexed to help you figure this out. In particular, the Gulf Coast, Texas, the Midwest, Great Plains, Intermountain West, California. These are great places to do CCS. These are also the places, coincidentally, where the hyperscalers are building centers. Last but not least, it is a retrofit option, not just for the new plants that are coming online, but for existing plants. So if you want to actually have higher ambition around carbon management, you can do it. And in fact, many of the hyperscalers are thinking about this. They are in conversations with their utility operators to say, hey, we can bring this new plant online with carbon capture. Perhaps we can help meet our corporate targets by adding CCS to other parts of the grid. If you're going to do a CCS project, this is what you're actually talking about. Carbon capture, carbon transportation, and geological storage. These are the main things. Carbon capture means you're adding a chemical plant to a power plant. It means you're adding a chemical plant to a power plant. This is important because not everyone loves chemical plants. It's also important because not all utilities know how to operate and build these things. So it is not impossible. It is something we know how to do in this country very well, but you have to have your eyes open when you get into it. Second is transportation. You need to get the CO2 from the capture facility to its storage site. In the case of the Broadwing project that we'll be talking about, that is 1 kilometer. Not a big deal. For some of these other projects, you're talking about the tying into the hundreds or thousands of kilometers of pipeline in the United States. The United States has 8,000 kilometers of CO2 pipelines today. In some cases, though, you might be talking about barging, or trucks, or trains, or some other option to get the CO2 where it needs to go. Last but not least, you are storing CO2 in a deep geological formation. If you don't have storage, you don't have a project. No exceptions. No storage, no project, no exceptions. So you have to have that as part of the design criteria. Again, thankfully, a lot of states are well configured to do this, including Wyoming, which has Class 6 well primacy. But increasingly, more and more states are getting into this game as well. Texas, North Dakota, Louisiana, soon Colorado all have primacy too. What can it get you? Ballpark, if you add carbon capture to a plant, you're adding 30% in total power cost. That's a good rounding number. When we ran these reports before, we're talking about a new greenfield, something on the order of 70 to 100 dollars per megawatt hour. So in the range of reasonable things. With some of the run-ups in prices, it's gone up a bit more. This includes the 45Q tax credits, but these are the kinds of numbers we're talking about. But think of it, whatever you're talking about the prices today, you're looking about a 30% cost increase going into that price. What you get out of that, though, is 90 to 99% emissions reduction. You get very, very deep abatement along with this. In terms of time to market, again, the power plants are going up fast. 12 to 18 months for a new natural gas power plant. These are not combined cycle plants. Often they're single turbines or a bunch of peakers or something like that. It'll be 30 aeroderivative turbines sometimes. But while the rest of the infrastructure is coming online, like the Class 6 wells and the pipelines, the developers can build these power plants and then retrofit them afterwards. So this is part of the reason why this is so important, because it actually allows you to build the data center fast and also get to it. I will say, importantly, you have to get to that point where you are capture committed. If these power plants are capture ready, hey, my driveway is Ferrari ready. We have to get to a point instead where we are saying, no, we're going to commit to these abatements. So we're going to build these plants, bake it into the front-end engineering design study like the good people at Broadwing have done. Where are some of these projects happening? First ever natural gas plant in the world with CCS is going to be in the UK. It's turning on in a couple of years. This is the Teesside Peterhead project. It's going to almost a gigawatt of power, about 2 million tons a year of CO2, 3,000 temporary jobs with 1,000 temporary jobs ongoing. Next after that is going to be Calpine, which is retrofitting projects in California and in Baytown. These are pretty big, 500 megawatt project, 800 megawatt project, ballpark 1.5 to 2 million tons of CO2 a year. Those are bouldering forward. The first big data center project that's going to come online is in Decatur, Illinois. That's the one that Google announced, along with Archer Daniels Midland and low carbon infrastructure. 400 new megawatt build, so about 1 million tons of CO2 a year. This is the first big data center project that's going on there because they already have the Class 6 well. So they get to move extra fast. There are big projects, though, right behind it. Meta has their huge project, depending on who you're talking to, 20 or $30 billion total. That's going to be about 2.5 gigawatts of new power. Most of that will be natural gas. They are planning to do CCS. They have said so. Same thing with NextEra and Mobil. ExxonMobil, they're building a brand new facility, 1.2 gigawatts. That is a build it and they will come play, Field of Dreams. Crusoe and Telegrass was already mentioned. 1.8 gigawatt new, most of that natural gas again, allows you to move faster in these contexts. I will not go through this slide. You can have it. It breaks these things down in terms of the specifics, in terms of cost and time to market and the scale and flexibility. Know that there's a lot of things that you need to keep an eye on, but also know there's a lot of benefits to your state, to the hyperscalers, and to your utilities. There are some challenges and risks. I don't want to give the impression that it's all sunshine and light. In some cases, these are going to be first-of-a-kind projects. First-of-a-kind projects bring their own cost and risk elements with them. It also means that the communities don't necessarily know what you're talking about. They know what you're talking about with a windmill. They know what you're talking about even with a nuclear plant. They don't necessarily know what you're talking about here. So familiarizing people is part of that job. One challenge and risk is the offtake agreements. In the case of this Broadwing project, Google and low carbon infrastructure put together an offtake agreement that included their own merchant power, but also included ADM. So they worked it in advance. You got to do something similar here. You have to make sure that the power offtake and the CO2 offtake are aligned and ready. Reputational risk. This is relatively new. A lot of people have strong opinions about CCS. I think all of that's manageable, but you got to manage it. Otherwise, you might find yourself suddenly wondering about what's going on. I do want to add one last thing before bouldering along to the end here. The way that you deal with the accounting of this stuff is a lot like RECs. So you can think of these things as they're like RECs, but they're not actually RECs. They're not renewable energy credits. These are environmental attribute certificates. And the way these get reported under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the way that a buyer thinks about them is slightly different. You just need to be aware that that's a thing as well. With that, we got lots of resources at Carbon Direct. I'll put some links here in the chat function in a minute. But again, you guys can have access to these slides and the QR codes with them. We have whole documents on natural gas with CCS, on capture ready and capture committed, on meeting data centers, electricity demands, and other things for your interest and potential. With that, it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you very much, and handing off now to Austin.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Wicker, and I am the Senior Manager of State Government Affairs for the National Propane Gas Association. We are the national trade association representing about 2,400 member companies nationwide across all segments of the domestic LPG industry. And of course, thank you very much to NASEO for having me on the panel discussion today. So I appreciate the opportunity to join NASEO today as we examine one of the most urgent challenges facing states across the country, and that is how to meet the accelerating energy demand of data centers while upholding resilience, emissions, and public expectations. So by way of background, in late 2024, NASEO had approached NPGA with a rather straightforward question: can propane provide meaningful power solutions for data centers, particularly in backup, bridge power, and reliability roles? And it was that question that led to a full-scale research effort culminating in the white paper that we released earlier this year, Powering the Digital Age, Propane's Role in Low Emission Data Center Infrastructure. So what I would like to do today is walk you through 3 core findings from that work and explain why they matter to you all as state energy officials. The first is propane provides a materially cleaner and more flexible option for backup generation, enabling the displacement of high-emitting diesel. Second is propane supports bridge power strategies that allow data centers to operate before grid interconnections are complete, often months or years, while lowering the emissions footprint of these interim systems. And lastly, propane can help states maintain progress towards their state greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, especially in jurisdictions already facing public opposition to diesel use, grid constraints, or pressure to regulate backup generation more tightly. So now let's address the challenge facing states. Across the country, states are encountering the same fundamental issue. Data center electricity demand is growing faster than grid capacity can be built. According to the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, data centers consumed 4.4% of all U.S. electricity in 2023 and are projected to reach up to 12% by 2028. And in congested markets like Virginia, data centers already make up more than 21% of statewide load and could exceed 30% by 2030. So this growth is colliding with structural limitations, interconnection delays, transmission bottlenecks, increasing air permitting pressure on diesel backup fleets, and of course, community concerns around emissions, noise, and 24/7 diesel operations. So states are telling us 2 things simultaneously. We want the economic development that comes from data centers, and we need a cleaner, more flexible way to power them during outages or before the grid is fully built out. And this is exactly where propane enters the conversation. So let's begin with backup generation, which is the most immediate opportunity. So data centers universally require backup systems, and diesel has traditionally dominated the space. However, diesel is becoming increasingly difficult to permit in high growth areas, of course, due to NOx, PM, and localized air quality concerns. So propane offers a lower emissions profile. Negligible particulate matter is documented in EPA's AP42 emissions data. Lower NOx emissions rather than tier 2 diesel systems. 15 to 20% lower CO2 emissions compared to diesel combustion in SI engines compared to CI diesel engines, and no methane content, eliminating the life cycle concerns associated with natural gas. And unlike diesel, propane has an indefinite shelf life when stored properly, meaning standby tanks maintain fuel quality without degradation. So states with strict limits on generator testing hours or emissions intensity will find that propane backup systems are, generally speaking, easier for data centers to permit and more acceptable to surrounding communities. We also highlight in the white paper that several manufacturers now produce industrial scale propane generator sets suitable for data center applications, including Rolls-Royce MTU, Generac, Kohler, and the Wildcat Roughneck lines. These are not small home generators, rather they are EPA certified high capacity systems built specifically for commercial and industrial loads. And companies like Enchanted Rock Microgrids, based out of Texas, have already demonstrated ultra clean microgrid models using propane that can even meet California's CARB requirements, showing that propane can serve in markets even with tight environmental controls. So for states trying to balance economic development with emissions, propane gives data centers a way to reduce diesel dependence immediately without sacrificing reliability. The second major finding, and arguably the most important, I would say, for NASEO is the role propane can play in bridge power. Bridge power, of course, refers to temporary yet often multi-year on-site generation used to bring a data center online before a utility grid connection is available. In Northern Virginia, across Ohio, and Phoenix, and parts of Texas, developers face 2 to 5 year wait times for transmission expansion, substation upgrades, general interconnection, etc. In the meantime, data center operators are turning to on-site generation. Today, that bridge power is overwhelmingly diesel. Of course, there are other options as well. This, however, creates air quality challenges, community opposition, permitting delays, conflict with state emissions targets, and when combined, slowed or stalled development timelines. Propane provides an alternative pathway. Because propane is portable and delivered by truck and not dependent on pipelines, it is non-utility regulated, avoiding many barriers related to that. Obviously cleaner than diesel, helping states maintain attainment status, scalable, allowing operators to phase capacity in over time, and can be compatible with microgrids, supporting hybrid configurations with renewable sources as well. Now, this matters because speed to power is becoming the decisive factor for where data centers choose to locate. States that can offer a cleaner interim power option will have a competitive advantage and will face less resistance from the communities hosting these projects. Now, the third pillar of the white paper focuses on how propane helps states maintain compliance with emissions goals. Many states, including Virginia, Oregon, Colorado, Michigan, and Washington, have enacted ambitious climate and decarbonization statutes. A significant portion of data center emissions fall under Scope 1, on-site combustion, Scope 2, purchased electricity, and propane can reduce both. Again, by replacing diesel in backup fleets, by reducing reliance on diesel fuel bridge power, enabling developers to meet air permit thresholds without particulate controls, and supporting hybrid renewable systems such as propane CHP, combined heat and power paired with solar. So states with draft or finalized energy security plans, one of which I'll reference is North Carolina, their draft energy security plan explicitly highlight the value of on-site stored fuels that are not pipeline dependent during emergencies. And of course, propane aligns perfectly with that framework. And states with energy choice laws or states reevaluating permitting frameworks for data center generators will find propane to be a compliance-friendly alternative that avoids many of the political and environmental challenges associated with diesel. Now, most importantly, propane allows states to say yes to data center development without compromising air quality or climate objectives. So what does this mean for state energy officials? For NASEO members, there are three policy considerations worth evaluating. One, include propane-based microgrids and backup systems in resilience planning. If your state identifies data centers as critical infrastructures, many of which do, propane should be included alongside solar storage and natural gas in your resilience frameworks. Second is to encourage fuel-neutral permitting pathways. States that evaluate generation options based on emissions outcomes rather than fuel identity will find propane systems naturally rise to the top for backup and bridge applications. And third, recognize propane as an emissions reductions tool in non-attainment or near-attainment zones. Propane gives developers a way to reduce NOx and particulate matter impact significantly compared to diesel, offering municipalities a practical mechanism to address community concerns while preserving economic development. So allow me to close with this. The growth of the digital economy is, of course, not slowing down. Data centers are no longer specialized facilities scattered across the country. They are foundational, often classified as critical infrastructure, as essential as water systems and transportation networks. But their energy needs are growing faster than the grid can support. States are being asked to solve a set of problems that are at times in tension with one another, enable economic development, maintain reliability, avoid emissions backsliding, and preserve community trust. So as you consider your state's own energy strategy, generator policies, resilience plans, and data center permitting frameworks, I would encourage you to think of propane not as a legacy fuel, but rather as a modern reliability asset capable of supporting a digital economy that depends on uninterrupted power. So that is it for me. I apologize I did not have any slides. Rather, you got to look at my face the entire time. But thank you all very much, and I look forward to the questions later.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you, Dr. Friedman. That was a lot of great information there. I think we're going to turn it over to a little bit of a moderated panel here. But NASEO staff, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat or have them chime in. I'd rather hear from the audience than have me asking questions or whatnot. So I think maybe just to start things off, though, this is a question for both Dr. Friedman and Austin. But Dr. Friedman, I'd like for maybe you to start. You mentioned first of its kind technologies, and that's what a lot of these policy or these new technologies are, especially the ones that you described. What can be done at the state level to de-risk some of these projects? A lot of these projects have a lot of unknowns, high costs, correspondingly high costs. What can states do to de-risk some of these projects?
So excellent question. A couple of things come to mind. Let me start by saying don't do the wrong things. One of the wrong things to do is to set sort of hard timelines for certain stuff. First of a kind projects are gonna have time overruns. They're just gonna be delayed. It is almost certainly the case. So the more that you constrain like the time to get things done, the harder it'll be for these people to do it. The proactive thing to do is actually fix that. Like if there are long lead time issues, try to figure out how to help these guys get there. If that is like getting approvals, if that is if the state runs the permitting process, like work that so that that is not an impediment. Anything from rain to the Gulf of Suez can delay these projects. So it's good to really try to minimize it. Second is with respect to costs. I'm aware that y'all have to balance the needs of consumers with the needs of the builders and the communities. Like that is not an easy thing to do. But at some point or another, there's going to be a question of who pays. Just be ready for that question. Have a plan. And in terms of anybody who's putting these projects together, the more that you can create sort of a risk reduction something or a contract for differences or some other way to buffer the costs of these things, that is a huge add. That actually becomes a magnet for projects in your region if you can do such things. The last thing I'll say is actually like help with the community engagement. Help. Don't just wait for it to happen. Really lean in and be proactive. Many of these companies are great at a bunch of things. That doesn't make them great at community engagement automatically. They often don't really know the communities they're talking to. They think the elected officials are the same things as community leaders. That is not true. So try to find a way to like direct them to the right people, make sure those conversations go well, that the project developers have their ears on, like do what you can to really help them get to yes.
Well, those are great points, and I want to pull on the community engagement side of things maybe here after we hear from Austin. Austin, any other thoughts on de-risking projects, or maybe to even zoom out a little further? You talked a lot about what different states are doing with policies and things like that. Maybe you could summarize some of the overarching themes of what successful policies are looking like across the country for everybody else on the call.
Sure. And I think that, from at least from my perspective, maybe it's a little bit different of a take. I would agree with Dr. Friedman that community engagement is absolutely critical, and I think is probably the area that's lacking the most. I'm actually presenting to the National League of Cities this week as well, and that's the number one thing that I've heard. Of course, when you're looking at opposition to data centers wanting to come in and that potential benefit and economic development, it's always localized. It's always where you're having the pushback. It's really not from state legislators or state officials, although that may be the case. It's usually at the local level. I always say that I think data centers have the same problem that nuclear has had, is everybody wants it, they just don't want it in their backyard. And so, you want the benefits, you don't want the noise. That was something I was discussing, with backup generators, is noise and vibration concerns. I live in Kentucky. I know that Louisville is facing that same issue. It's right next to a neighborhood. So I think getting in with your community, articulating the benefits, and being clear about the project timelines, who's coming in, as transparent as you can be, is generally speaking one of the best things that you can do. And again, I will touch on, again, this is more specific to where I come from. I think that propane, when we're speaking about resilience, specifically backup generation, is what I'll talk about. I think propane does offer a lower emissions alternative. I can tell you something that that has been articulated to me from communities is they're just concerned about emissions, right? Not just what is the pull on the grid going to be? Will my utility bill go up? But if they're operating on intermittent or bridge power, or if they do have times that they're out, is this going to be dirty? Is it going to be pollute our community? So I think that alternative solutions like propane, that are really more of a drop-in solution rather than sort of radical alternatives, if you will, are beneficial. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to hone in a little bit more.
Oh, that is great. And it looks like we have a question in the chat about community engagement. So one thing, this is a real kind of becoming more of a passion of Austin, you mentioned the backyard thing, and that's absolutely true. But I've heard the new acronym BANANA, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And it's becoming more and more of a prevalent thing. Dr. Freeman, do you have something real quick? You're on mute.
Sorry, on this exact point, after bananas comes nope, not on planet Earth. So we get a lot of that too. It is easy
Yeah.
to oppose things. It is harder to hold people's hands and get to yes. The question asked about sort of the boilerplate, like, is there
Yes.
some place to go? Let me start by saying, yes, such things exist. I would be quite cautious about using them because, in point of fact, each community is distinct. Each community has its own needs and concerns. Each has its own history. And some of the projects that we've been involved in, like a pellet mill nearby, like dug a bad trench, and that's the thing that everybody's exercised about. And if you don't know that, then you're just talking to the wrong thing. I can tell you for nothing, Carbon Direct offers that service. We have a community engagement team of experts whose job is to find the community benefits and help get to yes on stuff. But I would be leery of sort of boilerplate approaches or cookbook approaches. What works in Virginia is not going to work in Louisiana, and it's not going to work in Washington or California. Like these are really different places with different histories.
Yeah, totally. Austin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I will say, and again, propane, we're sort of the odd man out, so I always have a little bit more of a unique perspective. But some of the more productive conversations that we've had with the data center industry, broadly speaking, communities, is of course propane's ability to allow siting flexibility for data centers. Now, there is never a silver bullet. If you go out into the middle of nowhere, it's never the middle of nowhere, right? It's always owned by somebody or people live around there. So I'm not saying that this is a silver bullet, but of course, we all know that, we look at markets like Northern Virginia that are incredibly congested. There are, neighborhoods with hundreds of thousands of people with major data centers, data center row, right, that's lined up there. So there are data centers, there are companies, entities that are looking to get out. Generally speaking, we're talking maybe Texas or the West, where pipeline infrastructure is more limited than other parts of the country. So there is flexibility with, the flexibility that propane offers. It's a deliverable fuel by rail or by truck. And of course, with low emissions technologies, as I mentioned, Enchanted Rock is one entity that has a propane microgrid that does offer, non-pipeline connected, non-interconnected power for data centers. So that is one solution, I guess, if we're trying to tie it back to that community engagement. I think there will come a point where data centers will have to start looking to areas with more land, just simply away from communities. There are going to be communities that will reject them time and time again, and we're going to have to get into the conversation about what that looks like. And there's a lot of things that don't fall in my purview, like water or land permit siting and things like that, thank goodness. But that is something that we absolutely are going to see happening, and propane offers an interesting solution for that, because you do not have to be tapped into a gas main. You do not have to be interconnected if you're operating, for example, on something like a microgrid. But I think that's something that's a fruit that we're going to see from community engagement, is there will be people who say, nope, not here, time and time again. And then we're going to start seeing a wider spread of data centers moving out into more remote locations. So they are going to need options, power options, as they move into these more remote locations where they're limited the infrastructure.
No, totally. And we see that here in Wyoming. It's one thing to be close to Cheyenne or close to a city. And then, the further out you get, there's a lot more infrastructure considerations there. And Dr. Friedman, I'm going to be stealing the NOPE acronym now. So I stole the banana from somebody, so I'm going to be stealing that from you. So with your permission. We did get another question in the Q&A from somebody. Are there any policy challenges that state energy offices can address for propane or CCUS? I know we've been hitting on that a little bit, but maybe you could drill down a little bit. Dr. Freeman, I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yep, you'll learn that I like talking, so
No worries.
happy to be the first out of the gate.
No worries.
Couple of things. First of all, if your state has a renewable portfolio standard but does not have a low carbon portfolio standard, please fix that. Because that way you can get nuclear and geothermal and small hydro and CCS and these other things coming in. Even if you have abundant renewable resources, as you get past a certain threshold, depending on your state, 30, 50, 70%, it becomes an issue. So one policy challenge is the restrictions that certain kinds of policies place on these things. that they just don't qualify for price support or whatever. Like that's thing one. Thing two is you need to permit infrastructure for all this stuff. And it's not just the CCS pipelines or it's not just the storage wells. You need to permit transformers. You need to permit additional bus bars. You need to permit other kinds of infrastructure. You may need to reverse a gas pipeline like the Tallgrass people did in Nebraska to Colorado. You might, like, there's these things you might need to do. The infrastructure challenges are huge. And again, that stuff is ready for policy innovation. I'll tell you that now. Go in there and instead of like, well, we've always done it that way, or there was a lawsuit 50 years ago, that's why we're doing it this way, or PURPA suggested this back in the 90s. Like, you really need to pry some of that stuff open and say, okay, well, how can we reimagine these things for deployment as opposed to prohibiting bad outcomes? Because if you're just prohibiting bad outcomes, then you don't deploy any of this. You don't get the data centers, you don't get the jobs, you don't get the emissions reductions.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. Austin, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from the perspective of propane, building on what I mentioned in my little spiel there was, I think proactive resiliency planning is very critical. Having plans in statute saying data centers will meet these requirements, they will have this threshold, I think is really critical. The example that I referenced was, and this was North Carolina's draft strategy when I read through it, when I was working on the white paper. It may be finalized now, so forgive me if it is and anything has changed. But from when I had read through it, they were discussing the importance of having non-pipeline dependent fuels for critical infrastructure. I think it is something that you should consider and think about. If we have, especially like taking context North Carolina, hurricanes, if you live in an area where you can have natural disasters that really can shut down the grid for a week plus, I think those are really critical considerations. Another really good example is Texas Senate Bill 6 of the 2025 session that imposed resilience requirements is really specifically for data centers. I think that's an excellent example of legislation that other states should consider. Texas is a different story; it's a different beast with ERCOT, but the resiliency and financial requirements, rather, that they put on data centers, I think are really critical for ensuring that there's not going to be placed, this overburdensome load on the grid, and that when data centers come online, that they do have the necessary resilience backup measurements in place. Another example, just very briefly, was Utah Senate Bill 132. It established a new program within the Office of Energy Development to enhance the availability of resilient and reliable power for critical infrastructure when the grid fails to meet necessary demands. All these, I think, are very critical. Propane obviously has a role to play there. Other fuels do as well. But ensuring that there is resilient, reliable backup power for critical facilities is very necessary as they're starting to expand.
Two other quick things, if I may, to follow on to Austin, who, again, spot on in kind of every way. One of them is an ounce of planning, an ounce of analysis, totally worth it. Just do a little front-end analysis, hugely, hugely valuable. At some point or another, this will turn into a need to jack up prices or add additional tax breaks or money from Treasury or something. If you don't have the planning and analysis, you'll never get to yes on this stuff. So just do a little bit. Figure out what you need to do and then figure out how to do it. I would also add that to Austin's point, California recently passed SB 613, I think, which approved CO2 pipelines in the state. And that's an example of sort of a modest thing that will end up being a big deal. California has extremely ambitious climate goals, extremely good renewable resources, extremely stringent policies of all kinds for this stuff. They are still building a huge amount of uncontrolled natural gas for data centers. They don't want it to be that way. They want CCS to be part of the solution, and they have amended their policies to make that a viable option.
It's all great examples and great points. Another question, excuse me, from the Q&A chat. Can you share a little bit about what potential business models can look like to advance these projects? Thinking, for example, of the recent Google announcement of a data center paired with natural gas CCS.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the Project Broadwing, which I mentioned in passing and is in my deck. That is a very innovative business model. First of all, it is not behind the meter. You need to understand that most of these data center owners and operators don't want to own the power plant. They just don't. So they, however, have put together almost 100% of the offtake. Between Google and ADM, that's like 95 to 100% of the power offtake. And ADM is taking all of the CO2 because they're the ones who own the storage site. So that's an example of an interesting business model where it's basically a slaved power plant, but still a merchant power plant. It's not behind the meter. And they got the structures right. There's perfectly other good business models. In fact, we're reporting this in a conference in February. So, for example, you could just have a company like Southern Company do the whole thing. Like they're just vertically integrated. They do the storage site, they do the pipeline, they do the balancing, they do the power generation, they just manage the whole thing. You can also go in a rather different direction and have a circumstance where the hyperscalers just pay the tariffs. And companies like Microsoft are interested in doing that. They're like, hey, Wisconsin Utility, you guys do what you're going to do, but we will pay the extra money so that it doesn't become a burden on your ratepayers. And they're very sensitive to that. So good way to sort of think, there's a range of these business models. Happy to follow up with anybody here who's particularly interested in these things. But people are getting creative and they're thinking about new ways to structure these deals and new way to structure the offtakes. It is not that different from what it was like for PPAs and VPPAs sort of 20 years ago. People were going, well, let's try this, let's try this. That creativity is going to let you do more in your state.
Austin, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that the integration of propane, be it for backup generation or bridge power, it certainly offers some pretty interesting business models. You know, again, propane is deliverable fuel, so we are not regulated by public utility commissions. So a very different structure there. The interesting thing about propane, as I talked about when I was speaking and I discussed in the white paper, is the storability of propane, right? So whatever storage you have built on site, as long as it is stored properly, and if it's in the tank, it's stored properly, propane effectively has an indefinite shelf life, which is very beneficial because you know, say for example, you're building the infrastructure to have backup generation on site. You choose propane. Whatever tanks that you have on site, that propane is there and it will stay there. If you don't need backup generation for a year, that's fine. You can use it next year, so on and so forth. I do think that bridge power is an interesting solution as well. Again, because we're non-utility regulated, the relationship is purely between the propane marketer or fuel provider and the data center. It is a private contractual agreement that they have. So once the power demand is estimated, the fuel amount is calculated, that's what's delivered. And so it is a private market interaction, which I think is probably amenable to many data centers who are interested. I think this is also more in the realm of smaller data centers, perhaps not the hyperscalers. If you're looking at more, small to medium sized data centers, I think this is a very appealing solution. If you're looking at bridge power, let's say you're operating on a propane microgrid that is behind the meter. It's not connected to a gas main. You're not technically interconnected. That propane storage that's on site can, of course, power the bridge power solutions that you have. And then once you, let's say you are able to get interconnected, then that solution that you have on site can serve the backup generators as well. So once the infrastructure is put in place, it's there and you have your fuel storage. So certainly a different business relationship and business model that you would have utilizing propane than other options.
It's great. And we're running out of time very rapidly. We've got a minute left. And I know there's some questions in the Q&A that we aren't going to be able to get to, but I think any of us would be happy to follow up with you all. One last question, though, to bring it home. For states, what is the role that the state can play in attracting new data center development? And I know we grapple with this all the time. In Wyoming and trying to figure out what's the proper role of the state. But what role does the state play, and then what benefits do these projects bring? Dr. Friedman, I'll start with you.
Sure, that one's easy. Uh, if it's about speed, 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 cost, and carbon, the first three are the important ones. That's an infrastructure play. You want to bring data centers to your play to your like these guys don't care about money really. So giving them a tax break is not their primary concern. Having power line hookups is. Having a good workforce is. Like they want to know how fast you could build these things. So workforce, infrastructure, that's the stuff that you can really use. The other thing is that they are not interested in one project, really. They're interested in 10 projects, really. So think about this as a long game. How do you get the first one is really the same way that you get the second, third, and fourth ones. Austin?
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to address the question in the Q&A and yours as well, I would agree with Dr. Friedman. Speed to power is probably the most critical component that's being taken into consideration. Propane can service this. We are the world's #1 producer of propane. We are the world's #1 exporter of propane. And we have been able to export propane even in high demand seasons. We have more propane than we can possibly use, which is a very good thing. We also have a very robust national network. Again, propane is a deliverable fuel, so it is moving through intrastate pipelines to certain degrees. However, it is delivered to the end-use customer via bobtail. Propane can be transported via rail. We do have a robust national system of supply chain. We do have a basic map generally of propane pipelines and terminals, what have you. Happy to share that with NASEO. I believe I've shared that with the Energy Security Committee in the past, but happy to share that as well. Companies like NGL Wholesale Supply, I've had discussions with them. They are more than poised to start projects tomorrow if need be. So we are in a unique situation of just sort of our structure, our position on the world stage, the abundance that we have of our fuel, a very long transportation and logistical setup that has been around since the 1920s and 30s. So we are well poised, and yes, I would agree with Dr. Friedman that speed to power is probably the most critical consideration. Letting data centers know that you can get them up and running, in a short time frame, I think is the most attractive thing that you could possibly pose to them.
With that, Camille and Kirsten and Kelsey, I'll turn it back over to you. But Austin and Dr. Friedman, thank you both so much. It was I learned a lot for sure. So really appreciate it. And thank you, NASEO, for putting this together.
Thank
Thank you
you
all.
so much, John and Austin and Julio, for your excellent presentation. And yeah, we will continue this data center series going forward and look forward to more discussions on this and other topics surrounding data centers. So with that, thank you all. Have a happy holidays and see you soon on a webinar.